This is Caleb Marcott's senior piano recital. And from what I have been told, the most formal piano recitals consist of the performer performing each piece and then sitting silently as they prepare themselves to play the next piece. In the Marcott household, we do nothing silently. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to speak between the pieces. And you know, here's the thing. The main thing, what happens between the pieces, that Caleb relaxes, focuses, and concentrates on his next piece. So I've told him not to pay attention or listen to when I'm speaking, and he said that wasn't necessary to tell me that. See, I believe to my two teenagers, my voice is like one of those noisemakers, you know, that at night, that repetitive drone that just puts you to sleep. That's how it functions. So if anything, you need to stay awake while I'm speaking, okay? But without further ado, Caleb Marcott. The first piece that Caleb will be playing is Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The amazing thing about this piece, this was Rachmaninoff's most popular piece. He performed for 51 years. It became the encore that was requested all the time. It was one of his first pieces. He wrote it at the age of 19 upon graduating from Moscow Conservatory. So, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. You know, I can remember the first time that Caleb ever played that for me. We used to have our keyboard in our bedroom, and he said, "Dad, have you ever heard this?" And he started playing it, and I recognized it, but I couldn't for the life of me tell you the name or the composer. So I looked over his shoulder, and he was playing from an iPad. He didn't have the sheet music in front, and I noticed that it was Rachmaninoff, and I said, "Caleb, that's Rachmaninoff. Do you think Miss Laura thinks that you're at that level yet to play?" And he turned around to me with a smile on his face and he said, "Dad, she thinks I can play anything." Which, even though that may not have been true, I was so thankful that we had a teacher who had instilled in him confidence and the belief that he could just approach anything. And that's one of the things that we really do thank God for. Caleb has had two phenomenal teachers. Miss Laura Whistler, who is here with us. Laura, if you just stand for a sec. For the last 4 years since we've been down here, and 4 years before that, we had Mrs. Linda Mott, who again, more about her later, but again, God has gifted us with great teachers, so we thank you for that. This next piece, I'm sure, will be familiar to you. I don't know if you knew this, but Scott Joplin wrote 41 pieces that were of a ragtime style. He also happened to write 2 ragtime ballets and 1 ragtime opera. This is Maple Leaf Rag. The first time Mrs. Mott introduced Caleb to that song, he said, I know this song. Now he had to be about 8 or 9 at the time. And what was interesting is we found out over the years that all of the songs that Caleb listened to on Little Einstein, or playing in the background at Nana's house, or playing Baby Faith, Baby Grace, Baby Praise videos, all of those things were lodged in his memory, and they've come in really handy down the road. So I encourage you, if you have young kids or if you have grandkids, play music, whatever it might be. Caleb knows a lot of jazz because he listens to jazz in my car growing up. But play music, that's how you get it into their bones. This next piece you all know. It's Opus 27. Also, it's known as Moonlight Sonata. You know, Moonlight Sonata was not given that name till about 30 years afterwards, when a poet, a German poet, Bellstadt, listened to the song and he said, it reminds me of a boat gliding across a lake in Switzerland. And so that name stuck. So this is movement 1 of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. how do you see music? I don't know about you, but when I listen to music, pictures come to my mind. And I think of the William Tell Overture. I think of horses galloping, maybe even a fox chase. And early on, it was kind of obvious that Caleb had great gifts in hearing music. And I wanted to know what he felt, what he saw, if he understood music. To me, Moonlight Sonata is hauntingly beautiful. And so I asked him, Caleb, what do you think about when you're playing this piece, just to see if his heart was resonating with it? And he said, when I play this, I think of Grandma and Poppy. And Grandma was my mother, and Poppy was Julie's dad. And they were people that just made you happier than anybody else on the planet. But both of them had passed the year before he answered that question. Caleb was playing this one time when we had our piano in the living room, and he finishes the piece, and I just went, Caleb, that is beautiful. And he goes, pfft. I said, what's that about? He goes, Dad, maybe I don't want to play beautiful music. I want to play football like everybody else. So I told Caleb's youth pastor at the time, and Nick was a great athlete. And I said to Nick, Caleb had made this comment, and Nick said, yeah, you go tell Caleb. Athletes get old and get injured. It's the musicians that get all the girls. So I came home, and I told my 12-year-old Caleb what Nick had said, and as a typical 12-year-old, he said, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I said, well, just wait a few years. Maybe it'll mean something more to you. This next song that Caleb is playing is Liebestraum, which means love dream. And Litz takes a poem, which is all about love as the greatest joy in life, but it's one that's fleeting. And therefore, the refrain is, give it all your energy and joy while you have it. Liebestraum. It's 2:28. We're going to take a 15-minute break. If you're interested, the restrooms are out the back door and to your right down the hall. They're labeled. The labels are at the top, so you can see women's restroom, men's restroom. Or if that's backed up, there are restrooms downstairs too, which take a little more time to find. But in 15 minutes, which would make 2:43, I will call you back. Okay, so you'll hear from the microphone. Thank you. Well, thank you. We're here at the second part of the program, and Caleb's going to start off this part of the program with an etude by Chopin called Black Keys. It's called Black Keys because the melody is carried along. The first 46 notes are all black keys. It's only the 47th note, which is an F natural, which, if I've done my math right, that would be the 7th sharp, if there was one. E would be F. E sharp would be F. Chopin is an interesting character. A piano prodigy early on was noticed. He started performing at the age of 7. At 19, he had to flee Poland, as many did at the time because of the outbreak of war, and never was able to return to Poland. He lived most of the rest of his life in Paris. I don't know if it's because of his early experience, but he did not like performing in public. Only performed in public for 30 more times over the next 20 years. Because of illness, he died at 39. But Chopin, we have about 230 of his compositions. He's praised and lauded and appreciated for the lightness, the beauty, the originality, and the grace of his pieces. So this is the Black Keys Etude. As I said, Chopin was a childhood prodigy. The next song is by Debussy. Debussy, at the age of 10, went into musical college. And he actually was so far ahead of even some of his professors that they refused to teach him because he was so creative and innovative, and they could not figure him out. One of the interesting things about the trajectory and the journey of Caleb's life is at 19 months, Caleb was diagnosed with autism. And over the next few months, we were told he probably would never talk. Actually, he was being taught sign language because he just was not making a connection between using your voice and communicating. He would grab my shirt and point, and that was about it. A few years later, he had to have occupational therapy just to learn how to hold a pencil. So as you can imagine, as parents, we never really thought piano would be in his life. But God had obviously other plans for Caleb. And one of the biggest influences would have to be his sister, who, from the time my daughter could breathe, was speaking nonstop. This is before words were even in her glossary. And little by little, because I was encouraged to keep a journal, Caleb started using one-word sentences, then two-word sentences. They all were in response to Eden. His first two-word sentence, "No, Eden." But also, we've lived here for 4 years, and the Janus School is why we moved down to this area, and they have had a tremendous impact on his life. We came down for them to address his comprehension and his communication issues, and they also threw in to boot confidence. And so we are grateful for how God has guided us over the years. As I said, this is a piece by Claude Debussy. It's Arabesque No. 1. Hope you enjoy. You probably picture that the Marcott household is full of beautiful music all the time. Not only does Caleb play piano, but my daughter also does. It's not. We have a keyboard at home. We don't have a piano, which means they control the sound. And so when Caleb and Eden practice, they close the door to their room and they turn it down as low as possible. We never get to enjoy hearing that. So I never had any idea you could play like that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But we never, they don't play like this at home. So we demanded that my daughter play trumpet and French horn so we can hear when she's practicing. The next song is a Ukrainian folk song. And Caleb found this because he listens to everything. If you like 60s rock, if you like 70s rock, 80s, if you like jazz, Caleb is the one to talk to. He knows every song that's ever been written, it seems. But he came across this song right as the Ukrainian war burst out. And a friend of mine who is a second-generation Ukrainian American wrote to me saying this brought back such fond memories, and she really appreciated it. So Caleb has played this in different worship contexts as a prayer or a lament for Ukraine. The last piece this afternoon is another piece by Beethoven, Sonata 17. This, again, is a piece that was only named subsequently. In a personal conversation that Beethoven had with one of his students, he said to interpret it properly, you should go read The Tempest. Now, most have thought that that is Shakespeare's play, Tempest. However, Beethoven had 2 books in his library that were titled Tempest. But at least as you listen to this, you can hear that it alternates between tranquility and peacefulness and thunder and storm and restlessness. The Tempest. Thank you all for being here today. You know, I've had a number of friends who said to me, even just in inviting him here, that, wow, you must be so proud. I'm so thankful. God has been so gracious to us, and honestly, I'm so thankful for you here today. You don't know how much this means to our family and to Caleb that you're here to support him. Thank you so much for being here. Now, before you leave, there is food downstairs. And in case that's not enough to you, there is, and there's one word, pretzel factory. There's also another single word, there's Nana's chocolate chips. And there's water and there's fruit. But please come downstairs and join us. We'd love to have you come. But thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.